What is going on, kings and queens of this wonderful wonderland that we call YouTube? Today we are back once again with another review. This time we're going to be tackling For Honor. Now there's a couple little disclaimers I wanted to touch base with before we get too far into it. The first being, I know I probably look like a douche right now in my Cheshire Cat hat, but I've worn the same hat for quite the number of videos, and I just wanted to change things up. So sue me. And of course, the second disclaimer is a little bit more relevant to the review at hand, and it's that I only played the single player campaign of For Honor. I have not and will not touch the multiplayer stuff, because not only is multiplayer stuff not really my thing, but I don't really have the means to play multiplayer stuff. You know, I don't have Xbox Live or PlayStation Plus, so right away I'm kind of excluded from the multiplayer portion of the game, which I know might leave my overall vision and opinion of the game kind of askew, compared to those of you that have been able to play both portions of the game. But with that said, there will be spoilers in this video. Because if there wasn't, I really wouldn't have much to talk about and there wouldn't be much of a video. So I'm going to be going through, the single player campaign more or less in its entirety, and that kind of thing. So if you're somebody that's a fan of this game and wants to check it out for yourself, I would politely ask that you skip over this video and watch something else on my channel, because I don't want to be the guy that ruins it for you, and I would much rather you check it out for yourself if that's what you want to do. But if you're still with me, ladies and gentlemen, now I give you For Honor. And right off the bat, I have to say that For Honor was one of those games that from the beginning I got behind. It was a game that immediately and kind of naturally appealed to me. I'm a big fan of history, specifically historical warfare type stuff. And, when you throw knights, Vikings, and samurai into one game, and kind of throw in the deadliest warrior type vibe, I mean, I'm in, hands down. Enough said. And based on stuff that I was seeing, screenshots and trailers and stuff like that, I was even willing to bet that this game was going to be an early contender in my game of the year list. When it came to the single player campaign, I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting to happen. I think I was kind of expecting, what I was imagining was going to happen, of it being, this grand and epic campaign of war and blood and all that good stuff that we love. But instead, the single player campaign kind of gave me an empty feeling. It left me feeling very torn and more or less a little disappointed even. I mean, I'm torn because the campaign isn't bad by any means. It's not to the level that it's like it's the most god-awful game I've ever played and I didn't like it. It just wasn't good either. And I'm, disappointed because I didn't get that grand and epic feeling that I was waiting for playing the game. There wasn't a lot, if any, oh my god moments. This is the best game ever. The game kind of came across as mediocre and kind of underwhelming. There just wasn't a lot there. And I know right off the bat, it's For Honor is supposed to be primarily a multiplayer game, which by default means that the single player stuff isn't going to get that much attention. I'm aware, but I still wanted it to be better than I think it was. My first main problem with the game is just the fact that it was really short. I think, as we all know, the game was divided between three main factions: the Knights, the Vikings, and the Samurais. And each faction counts as its own chapter. So there's 3 chapters in the game. And each chapter is only about 6 levels long. So once you beat all 18 levels, all 3 chapters, the game is over. That's the single player campaign. And I guess, to me, it was fine, I guess, but like I said, it just felt really short. It felt that in the time it took me to start each chapter and finish each chapter, I was just getting settled into the character I was playing, and then it's like, okay, we're on to the next one. And I don't know. I guess I figured with, a storyline surrounding, 3 rather substantial factions in history, I guess I was expecting the story to be a little bit more in depth. I think it would have been a little bit better in terms of length if the game was even twice as long as it was. If each chapter was like 12 levels instead of 6, that would have been a step in the right direction. So it was just the overall length of the game that kind of got under my skin, really. I could have beaten the game in a day, in all seriousness. And the only reason why I didn't was because I wanted to, make sure that didn't happen. I wanted to give myself time to formulate what I liked and what I didn't like about the game. I wanted to give myself time to enjoy the aspects of the game that I did like, and kind of distinguish what I didn't like. And I didn't want to beat the game as quickly as I would have been able to. So I did make it stretch out over, 2 or 3 days. Now, the overall campaign, there's 2 main things that were a little bit concerning in the campaign. The first thing would be the bad guy herself, who goes by the name of Apollyon. And my major issue with Apollyon was there wasn't a whole lot of character development in her. Does she fit the bad guy slot in this game? Does she fit the character she needs to within the situation of the game? Yes, very, very well. But there just wasn't a whole lot of backstory or anything to her. She was very black and white and very straightforward. You were supposed to hate her. I hated her. But she was just your kind of mediocre bad guy. Really. Her main thing in the For Honor single player campaign is to just be kind of a thorn in everybody's side, and be an asshole. And that's exactly what she was. And basically, the only reason for her actions is because, kind of the only backstory that we got to Apollyon, and the reason why she's being such an asshole to everybody, is more or less that she hates peace. Excuse my French, but if I'm going to be completely honest, she thinks that peace is for pussies. It makes people weak, it changes things, and so she is out to prove that, her faction of the Blackstone Legion, or the Knights, is as strong and as powerful and as dominant as they always have been. And she was out to kind of create as much war and chaos as she can. And, she really does that really well. She has her little faction of wolves, she calls them, where she takes, all the bloodthirsty warriors from people she conquers and makes them her own. And basically, if you believed in peace, she mowed you down. And yet, basically, that's about it. The only rhyme or reason that she has is that she wants chaos, and she wants, the different factions, the Vikings and the samurai and the knights, to divert to their natural state of being bloodthirsty humans that all kill each other and whatever. And, it was just, she's a very generic bad guy. I do have to say, though, that once I did kind of research her, my overall kind of upturned nose attitude toward her kind of changed, because I thought, honestly, I was missing something in her. Like, I thought maybe I missed a trailer or a cutscene or something that explained a little bit more, so I looked up Apollyon. And the very first thing on Google that came up was a reference to the Bible. Apollyon is what is known as the Angel of Death. So I guess if you were to look at Apollyon in the game and look for, the similarities between the Angel of Death and this bloodthirsty, war-hungry, Master of Wolves, warlord that Apollyon is in For Honor, I guess it makes sense. And if I had to say one thing good about Apollyon, it would be that, her sense of warfare isn't your typical thing. It would be far too easy for her to go and attack the Vikings or attack the samurai, butcher them, slaughter them, and leave them for dead. That would be far too easy. What she does is a lot more sadistic, it's a lot more strategic, and a lot more methodical, because her whole thing is basically, like I said, forcing people back to their natural state of bloodthirst and chaos. She wants people to go from being sheep to being wolves. And how she does that is, with the Vikings specifically, she basically beats them to the point of, I don't want to say extinction, but she wins the war, more or less. And at the end of the first chapter, or the Knight's chapter, she basically takes all their food and just leaves them enough for all the clans to fight over, hoping that, the brink of starvation would force them to kill each other, which it does. With the samurai, basically, she raids their home, and kills the emperor, and then, leaves it to the like 4 of the clan leaders to fight over that power, which basically leads to a civil war among the samurai and, causes trouble that way. So I do have to say that as generic as Apollyon is, which is kind of a turnoff, I guess the way that she went about waging her war and, bringing about her wishes upon, these other factions was pretty unique, because it wasn't that straightforward blood on sword approach, if you will, at least not hers. So I guess that overall, thing about Apollyon was kind of cool. And while I'm on some good parts about the campaign, I'm just going to jump into saying probably the coolest part about the campaign was to see how the knights, Vikings, and samurais all kind of blended together into one story, and how they interacted together into the situation that the game presents. Because historically, of course, we all know that those three factions stand for very different things. With the knights, they're all about the oaths that they take and about loyalty and stuff like that. With the Vikings, they're a lot more family or clan based, and everything that they do is for the good and prosperity of their people. And the samurai is a lot more about honor and respect amongst themselves. And those three things within these three factions are represented pretty well, I have to say. And it's just very cool. It was very neat to see how those three major kind of creeds of the factions came together into one situation. With that being said, I have to say that, I was curious to see specifically how the samurai were going to be brought into the overall story. Because the Vikings fighting the knights and so on and so forth is more or less historically correct. As far as history goes, I would say that they probably weren't fighting the type of knights that were depicted in this, but with the whole Crusades and stuff, it was more historically plausible. But I was very interested to see how, kind of the random faction to throw into all this, the samurai, who were across the world, more or less, while these two factions were fighting, would be brought into the situation. And I have to say that I wasn't a fan of how they were integrated into the story. It was very weird, and as far as the storyline goes, the Vikings, the chapters were going in a straight line, and then the samurai, got thrown into it, and it just felt like the storyline just took a unneeded, very hard left. And what I mean by that is it takes place in the Viking chapter of the game, the second chapter of the campaign. So basically what happens is that, the Apollyon's actions toward the Vikings and leaving them to starve kind of started an uprising, and the Vikings are going after the Blackstone Legion, or the Knights. And basically what happens is in a level they fight to take back a port that the Knights own, so they can build ships and basically wage war against the Knights. So they take it back, and they're kind of taking inventory, they're looking through things, looking for supplies and things of that nature. And the Vikings stumble across some chests off of Japanese ships, which contain, samurai masks and swords and things of that nature, different memorabilia of the samurai. And basically, the Vikings tell the raider or the leader that you play, that the samurai and knights have kind of been having naval disputes, and there's Japanese ships all over the place, and there's samurai stuff all over the place. And basically what the decision that your character comes to is, the samurai suck and they're weak, so let's just go raiding and kill them all. Now I know that when it came to the Vikings in this game, we're kind of dealing with, the stereotype of, they go raiding and pillaging and killing anything with a heartbeat. I get that. But even so, just for, if anything, just for story's sake, I would have really liked to see an overall purpose for them going to attack a faction that really had done nothing to them. The samurai hadn't really been attacking the Vikings or anything. Like, basically the only thing that happened was the Vikings saw samurai stuff, and then they're like, oh, we have to go kick their asses now for no reason. And I guess for as far as story goes, I guess I would have been like, samurais have a lot of resources that we could use to keep our people fed, or they have a lot of weapons that we could use, or something. Something that would not only lead to a raid, but also make sense as a transition. Because really, that was a very rough transition to go from, okay, we're fighting the knights, to taking that hard left and going, oh, they're samurai stuff. Samurais exist, we have to kill them. Unless I missed something in that part, and if I did, maybe you guys can correct me. But it just kind of seemed abrupt and more or less unnecessary, and before you know it, you built a navy and you're sailing over to the beaches of where the samurai live, and you just start raiding and massacring the samurai who have done nothing previously to the Vikings specifically. Even to the point where the samurai leaders are like, why are you here? You guys are assholes for this. And they just, especially because, like I brought up earlier, one of the major characteristics of Vikings historically and Vikings in the game are family. They're all about the people. They're all about the prosperity of the people. And, one minute the Vikings were complaining about how thousands of their people were being slaughtered in this war against the knights and da-da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden they went off on a tangent and went and started a war with the unsuspecting samurai for no reason. And I guess that part just kind of fell short. Didn't really add up, didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I guess in turn, you gotta connect the three factions somehow, and that's how they chose to do it. I just kind of think they could have smoothed things out a little bit and made it a little bit more realistic, and give us a clear reason other than Vikings just like to kick the shit out of things that they can. It just kind of seemed random and more or less unnecessary. But that kind of put a kink in my chain about it. I didn't get it playing through it. I still don't understand it, even making this video talking about it. It just didn't connect for me. But as a whole, it does all come together in kind of unclimactic way. Apollyon pisses off all three factions, some knights, some Vikings, and some samurai, and basically it makes them all clash in one place, where you finally get to have a showdown with Apollyon as the final boss of the game. You kill her, and that's pretty much it. It's very anticlimactic. There wasn't any epic fights. It was just a hack and slash boss fight, which is basically what the what the entire game is basically just block where your opponent is striking and slash where they're not blocking. That's pretty much the combat. It appeared very complicated to me at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's very easy. Kind of very generic's the wrong word, because it is unique as opposed to other hack and slashers out there. But in terms of a boss fight, especially a final one, there was just nothing there. It was like, okay, I'm gonna swing my sword till I win, and then Apollyon dies, and that's the end of the game. So, as as generic and kind of underwhelming and just kind of meh as the campaign is, as much as I don't really want to, I have to recommend that you play it because it's important. Because the story of the single player campaign kind of explains how and why the multiplayer stuff is happening. Like, why are the three factions fighting? And stuff like that. That's all explained. That's basically what the single player mode is there for, to serve as a prequel to the main event of the game, being, of course, the multiplayer stuff. So, I think because of the experience I had and being underwhelmed, as painful as it is, I would have to say that my overall opinion and my overall rating of the single player campaign probably have to be a 5 out of 10. It just wasn't something, like I said, in terms of understanding why things are happening in the multiplayer and there's this major clan war between the three factions. That is important. If you're interested in the game, you're probably going to want to play it. But as far as a standalone single player campaign, it is really take it or leave it. And I'm glad the single player mode is there. But I'm really more or less glad that the multiplayer mode is there, because as a standalone single player game, it's not worth $60. So, like I said, overall the game's okay. I think if you want to check it out, certainly do. Don't let me deter you. The single player and multiplayer stuff go together. They kind of, one goes into the other, one serves as a prequel to the other, and kind of explains the whole situation. So it's important, but I think is kind of that epic stuff that we wanted it to be, that grand epic war campaign feeling that we were hoping the single player campaign just wasn't there. And that's why my final opinion or final rating of For Honor single player campaign would be a 5 out of 10. Play it if you want. Don't play it if you don't want to. Kind of take it or leave it. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that'll about do it for this review. So as always, I salute you. My hat's on backwards, so I can't really salute right, but yeah, I salute you, and remember, we're all mad here.